Hi everybody, this video is going to be for those who are learning English. I've come up with a list of 5 tips or 5 recommendations for how I think you can improve your English, or which might be able to make your learning of the language a little easier. English is my first language and I have a few decades of experience speaking it, so I think I can help you out in some respects. So my first tip or first recommendation is that you pay more attention to the vocabulary and the grammar of English rather than the slang. I think especially when you're just starting out in the language, it's really important to develop a foundation in the grammar of the language and that you know the key words. Yes, of course, ultimately it helps to understand slang, but that's not what you want to focus on in the beginning because it will mean that you don't grasp the actual grammar and the foundation of the language, which is really key for ultimately becoming fluent and conversant in that language. The other thing is that, slang in English, as slang in any language does, varies from country to country. So the slang that's used in Australia may not be the slang that's used in the United States or the slang that's used in England. So it just makes more sense. It's more efficient to initially focus on the core vocabulary and the grammar of English. My next tip: focus more on pronunciation than worrying about, what your accent sounds like. As you know, in English, there are many different accents. There's the American accent, English accent, Australian accent, and even within each of those countries, there's different types of accents. So it's really not important. It's all English. What matters is that people understand the words that you're saying. So focus more on pronunciation rather than worrying about having an American accent or an English accent. Ultimately, we all have accents, and your native language will always impact on the accent that you have when you're speaking in English, and it really doesn't matter. I hear people speaking English with a zillion different accents, and they're still speaking English, and I still understand what they're saying. So it's much more important that you have clear pronunciation. Your accent isn't really that important, in my opinion. Number 3. Be very wary of direct translations, translating from your primary language to your secondary language, because often these direct translations don't work. Yes, in many instances they do, and you're always going to rely on your primary language in trying to come up with a translation for the language that you're learning. But in regards to English, sometimes those translations don't work. For example, I'm learning Spanish, and sometimes my translations into Spanish don't make sense, and vice versa. There are things that we say in Spanish, for example, hacer preguntas, to ask a question. The direct translation to English would be to make questions. That doesn't make sense. In Spanish, they say, tener, yo tengo 25 años. I have, which means directly, I have 25 years. In English, we don't say that. We say, I am 25 years old. I really wish I was, but I'm not. There are other words which don't have the same meaning. For example, in Spanish, actualmente doesn't equal actually in English. What's another example would be constipado in Spanish doesn't mean the same thing in English. So these are good examples. Okay, number 4. It's really important to focus on all 4 aspects of the language: reading, listening, writing, and speaking. If you just focus on 1 or 2 of those different domains, you're not going to develop, you're not going to become proficient in the language, and you're not eventually going to master the language. So it's really important that you don't neglect any one of these 4 domains, and that you develop experience in each of them. Obviously, if you improve your reading, that's going to improve your writing. If you improve your listening, that's going to improve your speaking, and vice versa. So they're all important. Obviously, speaking is probably the most useful to you, and it's where you'll experience the most pressure. But if you improve your performance in the other 3, it will help your speaking as well. My 5th point: expose yourself to native speakers in all types of contexts, be that online, in text message, in real life, videos, whatever. You have to expose yourself to people who actually speak the language and who are native speakers of it. So that means watching videos, watching movies, becoming friends with people whose first language is English, writing in English on text message, whatever you can, participating in groups on the internet and Facebook, all of that. All of these things will help you develop contact with the language and give you opportunities to practice what you're learning. In that sense, it's also particularly important to interact with people who are sensitive to the fact that you're learning English and you want to learn English, because there's nothing more disheartening to people who are impatient and who don't have any interest in helping you practice. So be careful who you interact with, but at the same time, don't have fear, and truly really try and get out there and practice your use of English. So these are just my 5 tips, 5 recommendations. Obviously, there are many more. I could come up with a list of 20, and maybe another day I'll make a different video, but these are just my initial 5 suggestions. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me. I have lots of videos on my YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/El Australiano. So if you're interested in subscribing, click the subscribe button. Thank you. Bye.